Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. As of September 2025, Russia's once formidable image of strength is collapsing under the weight of a costly and protracted war, crippling international sanctions, and mounting internal pressures that threaten to unravel the very fabric of the nation. Ukraine's targeted strikes on Russia's vital energy infrastructure have left a trail of destruction, disrupting oil production and causing widespread power shortages across the country. The Kremlin's carefully crafted narrative of resilience has unraveled. The war's relentless financial drain, combined with repeated attacks on oil refineries and key industries, have pushed the Russian economy past its breaking point, leaving businesses shuttered and workers without jobs. Sanctions have choked off access to advanced technology, foreign investment, and global markets, isolating Russia from the world economy and stalling innovation. Meanwhile, Ukraine's persistent strikes threaten the very revenue streams, oil and gas exports, that once fueled Russia's ambitions and now barely sustain its war machine. What began as a so-called special operation has devolved into a grinding war of attrition, devouring not only Russia's wealth, but also its future prospects, as military losses mount and resources dwindle. In this chapter, we'll examine the strategic impact of Ukraine's attacks, the grim economic data that paints a picture of national decline, and the shifting geopolitical landscape that now surrounds Russia. We'll also explore the daily struggles of ordinary Russian citizens, who face rising prices, shortages of basic goods, and an uncertain future as a superpower's foundations crack beneath their feet. Russia's economic collapse is a stark cautionary tale for the 21st century, reminding us that in an interconnected world, no nation, no matter how powerful, is immune to the far-reaching consequences of its actions and decisions. Russia's economic crisis began with its 2022 invasion of Ukraine, a decision that would have far-reaching consequences for the nation's financial stability and global standing. The invasion triggered an unprecedented wave of Western sanctions, meticulously crafted to isolate Russia from the global economy and cripple its financial systems. These sanctions targeted everything from banking and trade to technology and energy, growing in both scope and severity over the years. In response, Moscow attempted to pivot its energy exports toward India and China, seeking new markets to replace lost European buyers. However, this shift came at a steep cost, as Russia was forced to sell oil and gas at significant discounts, drastically slashing the vital revenue that once fueled its economy. Sanctions also severed Russia's access to Western technology and critical components, leaving industries scrambling for alternatives. The resulting workarounds were expensive and inefficient, and they failed to halt the country's accelerating economic decline. Meanwhile, the cost of war has ballooned out of control. Military spending now consumes a staggering 40% of the federal budget, draining resources from essential services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure, and leaving ordinary Russians to bear the brunt of austerity. Russia's initial resilience was propped up by large pre-war reserves of gold and foreign currency. But after years of economic strain, those financial buffers are nearly depleted, leaving the country increasingly vulnerable. After 3 years of relentless economic warfare and soaring military expenditure, Russia's economy is faltering. Factories have closed, consumer spending has plummeted, and GDP continues to shrink, pushing the nation to the brink of collapse. The shadow of war has left the Russian economy battered, isolated, and unsustainable, with an uncertain future looming on the horizon. In late summer 2025, Ukraine shifted tactics, launching a relentless campaign against Russia's oil refineries using drones and Western missiles. 16 of Russia's 38 major refineries have been damaged, disrupting 17% of refining capacity and slashing diesel exports to 5-year lows. This has deprived the Kremlin of billions in revenue and triggered a severe domestic fuel crisis, with shortages now hitting even Moscow. Ukraine has turned Russia's greatest economic strength, its energy sector, into a creeping weakness. The strikes have accelerated Russia's slide into full-blown crisis. The data is stark. Russia's economy is facing a crisis of historic proportions, with numbers that paint a grim picture of the country's financial health and future prospects. Russia's federal budget deficit hit 4.9 trillion rubles by July 2025, a figure that far exceeds what officials had projected for the entire year, signaling a deepening fiscal hole. The government has been forced to raid its sovereign wealth fund, once a symbol of stability, and raise taxes on businesses and citizens alike, in a desperate attempt to plug the gap. Military spending now accounts for a staggering 40% of government outlays, diverting resources from social programs, infrastructure, and the needs of ordinary Russians. In effect, the government is mortgaging the country's future for a war it can't afford, sacrificing long-term stability for short-term military aims. The National Welfare Fund, once a crucial buffer against economic shocks, is now nearly depleted, leaving the nation with little room to maneuver in the face of new crises. This financial vulnerability leaves Russia exposed to further shocks, with ordinary citizens already feeling the pinch as prices rise and jobs disappear. Oil exports, the lifeblood of the Russian economy, have plummeted by nearly 1 million barrels per day, undermining the country's ability to earn hard currency. This collapse in energy revenue is gutting the Kremlin's main source of hard currency, putting even more pressure on the ruble and the broader economy. Nearly 500,000 businesses have closed since the war began, from small shops to major factories, as the private sector struggles to survive in a war-driven economy. Consumer demand has collapsed, and the economy is being rapidly retooled for war production, leaving little space for everyday needs and aspirations. The post-Soviet consumer economy, once a symbol of Russia's integration with the world, is being dismantled before our eyes, replaced by scarcity and uncertainty. In its place, a rigid, militarized system is taking hold, prioritizing weapons over welfare and control over consumer choice. The numbers tell a story of accelerating decay, a nation in freefall, where economic hardship is becoming the new normal for millions of Russians. The crisis is now felt in the daily lives of Russians. Fuel shortages have spread nationwide, with long queues at petrol stations and prices surging 15% across European Russia. In Crimea, strict rationing limits individuals to 30 liters of fuel, while officials plead for calm amid growing panic. Public services are quietly degrading. Hospitals face shortages, infrastructure projects are stalled, and social support is stretched thin. The Kremlin prioritizes military spending and payments to soldiers' families, but the trade-offs are increasingly painful for ordinary citizens. Decades of authoritarian rule and propaganda have fostered stoicism, but frustration is simmering beneath the surface. For now, the human cost is borne in silence, long queues, and growing uncertainty about the future. Economists and analysts agree. Russia faces its gravest economic test in decades. US President Trump now calls a complete Ukrainian victory realistic, while even pro-Kremlin voices admit the refinery attacks are an existential threat. Russian economist Vladimir Putin argues the wartime economic model was always unsustainable, and that gradual sanctions only prolonged the pain. International experts warn the Kremlin is running out of options, forced to juggle war spending, domestic stability, and shrinking reserves. The government's ability to manage these competing demands is eroding daily. Russia is approaching a breaking point where hard, unpopular choices are inevitable. The Kremlin's public response is defiant denial, dismissing economic collapse as Western propaganda while projecting an image of control. Behind the scenes, rushed tax hikes, fuel rationing, and frantic appeals for calm betray deep anxiety. The government gambles it can outlast Western resolve and Ukraine's resistance, pouring resources into the war at all costs. Propaganda frames hardship as patriotic sacrifice, blaming shortages on external enemies. But the gap between official narrative and daily reality is widening, and every desperate measure is a calculated risk. The Kremlin's defiance masks a desperate struggle to maintain control as its economic foundations crumble, Russia's economic collapse is shaking global energy markets, driving up prices and affecting consumers worldwide. A weakened, unpredictable Russia poses new risks to international security, with the potential for escalation or internal instability in a nuclear-armed state. The crisis is reshaping alliances as Russia leans on China, India, and Turkey, altering the global balance of power. For the West, sanctions are working, but managing the fallout of a Russian collapse is a complex challenge. New sanctions packages aim to tighten the economic vice, but the endgame remains uncertain. Diplomacy must ensure Ukraine's victory without triggering wider chaos. Russia's crisis is a global problem, and its resolution will shape the world for years to come. Russia's economic storm is the result of war, isolation, and strategic miscalculation, shattering the myth of a fortress economy. The war's costs, fuel shortages, depleted reserves, shuttered businesses, are symptoms of deep decay. The resilience of Ukraine and united Western support have exposed the flaws of Russia's authoritarian, resource-dependent model. The lesson is clear: true strength lies in economic diversification and global integration, not conquest. The world must maintain pressure, support Ukraine, and prepare for the geopolitical shifts ahead. Russia stands at a crossroads: continue down the path of isolation and decline, or choose a different future. The stakes could not be higher for Russia and for the world.